Okay. So I'm going to be mastering another track, and since the last time I put up a video of me mastering something, I've learned some things, and so hopefully I'll be able to explain some of those things that I've learned since then. But here is an old beat that I made years ago, and here's what it sounds like. Oh, and I don't have the stems for this, so as I master this, I'm going to have to be, like, if I want to affect things in a mixing way, I'm going to have to be kind of creative with it because, again, I don't have the stems for this. So okay, so I'm gonna skip to a loud part. So one of the louder parts, I think this is a section that just repeats 3 times. So first things first, let's put this on the mixer channel. And I'm going to start making some adjustments to things because I don't have the stems for this, so I can't remix things as I want to. So I'm going to make some mixing adjustments using Maximus before I actually start doing any compression or anything like that. So let me make sure it's not too loud. Okay, I really want the clap to be louder, and I also kind of want the hi-hats to be a little bit louder. So I'm going to take this middle band, and I'm going to bring it into where it that clap is mostly sitting, which is about in here, because this is mostly the hats over here. Okay, so I want this to be a little bit louder, but I don't necessarily want this other stuff to get louder that's in here. I just kind of want to focus on the clap. So let me see if I can narrow this in and get a little bit less of this other stuff. Okay. Alright, so to further accentuate what I'm talking about, I really want the clap to get louder, but I don't necessarily want to affect these other things. I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to put a point. So here's my point. It's up here. So I want somewhere between there and the start of my clap, which we can say is here because anything between these 2 points is basically just the clap. Okay, everything else is below this line here, and I just want the clap to be louder. So I'm going to take just the part that contains the clap, and I'm going to increase the volume a little bit here. So we're bringing the volume of just the clap up there, and just the stuff that goes above that. Now I want the clap to be a little bit mono, so I'm going to put this a little bit merged. Listen to everything. So doing this allowed me to just turn the clap up, just this frequency range of the clap up, because I can't, like I said, I don't have the stems. But I was able to leave everything that was quieter than the clap alone. So, okay, let's work on these hi-hats, because I want the hi-hats to be a little bit louder as well. But I don't want the clap necessarily being the loudest part in this high range, so I am going to do a little bit of compression here. Let's keep it light. Oh, so something I've learned since the last video I made was before, when I was saying I was compressing, I think I was only limiting. So I had this dot over here, and then I was just bringing the threshold down. And I think that's just limiting. Whereas if you do the same thing but you pull this up, you're going to get various levels of compression. So the flatter it is, the closer you are to limiting, and the further up here it is, on this straight line, the less compression you're doing. So these first couple of steps, I just want to bring it down a little bit and just do a light compression. And as I go, I'm going to be compressing more and more. But at the very beginning stages, I don't want to do too much. So I'm going to be lightly compressing, and then I want to bring this down until I want to kind of cut off the high end of the clap a little bit using this compressor because I want to bring up those hats a little bit. So let me do that. So as you can see, I'm not hitting, I'm only compressing the clap here. It's not really compressing anything but the clap, which is what I want on the high end. And I want to bring up those hats a little bit. So I'm going to do something similar to what I did before. So I'm going to make another dot. Let me just do this. So this is bringing up the volume of the quietest stuff that's in this range here. And I'm also lightly compressing the high part of the clap here. Okay, while I'm here, I might as well compress some of the lows, although this is almost the entire beat, so I really want to be careful with how much I'm compressing here. So again, I'm going to just bring this up and lightly compress. Let's have a high attack. I don't want to affect things too much. So the amount of compression I'm doing here is like minuscule. It's not even going to be noticeable. Let's go to the master. And I like to pull the pre-knob down until I'm just barely compressing the highest and loudest parts. And then I pull the post knob up or down, depending on what I did, to make up for that. So I pulled this down 0.9, so that went up by 0.9. Okay, I think I want to do the same thing I just did for the clap, but I want to do it for the bass, because my bass is pretty weak. It's not really hitting the way that I want to. So I'm going to add another instance of Maximus, and this time instead of focusing on the clap, we're going to focus on the low end. Okay, so let's focus on the low end. So I'm going to bring this to be 100 and below, and then we'll make this like 1 to 200. So let's look at just the medium range here. This is mostly the kick. I think I want this a little bit louder, so I am going to compress it a little bit here, but I'm also going to turn it up at the end. So tiny amounts of compression here. I just barely want to be grabbing stuff. Just barely. Okay, so 2.8, so I'm going to go up by 2.8. And then, well, I know I'm not exactly at 2.8, but I said I wanted to turn this up a little bit, so I'm going to go a little bit past 2.8. Let's go back to the low end. So this is, what was it, 50 hertz and below? Oh, 100, okay. So let's turn this up as well. And I think what I'm going to do is something similar to what I did before. I want the quieter part of this 808 to hit a little bit louder, and I want these tops to be a little bit quieter. So I'm going to put a point about right there is fine. And then I want stuff above this to get a little bit quieter. Maybe instead of making it get quieter like this, I can just bring the compressor down. So if I change that back to normal, I'm just barely compressing here, which is what I want. And I'm going down by 0.8, so I'm going to go up by 0.8. And then let me change this back to the way it was, because I want that quieter part of the 808 to be louder. Let's make it a little bit louder. So this time our highs are going to be basically the entire beat. So we can do slight compression here, but we don't want to do too much. 0.7, so bring it down by 0.7. I wish there was an easy way to do like small adjustments. Okay, let's go to the master. And again, very tiny amounts of compression. Just want to make things even. And I just want to hit the loud stuff. So I went down by 0.5, so let's go up by 0.5. Okay, I think I want the bass a little bit louder. So let me go back to the master, make sure I'm not compressing too much. Okay, I think I want that clap a little bit louder. Same thing with the hats. Okay, I think I want to focus on the hats now. And by the way, the reason I'm having to do all of this like focusing on certain sounds is because I did not do a good job mixing this initially. I had no clue what I was doing. So I'm essentially remixing it right now in the mastering stage, which is not what you want. You don't want to do that. That's way more work than it's worth most of the time. But again, I don't have the stems to this, and yeah, I just want to see how good I can make it sound. Alright, so let me focus on the hats this time. Okay, so I'm going to do some slight compression to the clap that's hitting down on this, just to bring it down a little bit in comparison to everything else in this range. Maybe just a little bit less. I'm actually going to make it a little bit louder. That's fine. And then anything below this line, let me make another point. That's not what I wanted. Okay, so I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to turn up the hats. So anything below this point here is going to get louder. So let me compress a little bit less. Okay, so let's make this stuff a little bit louder. And I want to merge these a little bit as well. Later, and the reason I'm merging this one is because later on I'm going to separate the higher frequencies out a little bit, just to give everything a little bit more width. But I don't necessarily want my hi-hats being pushed all the way out to the sides. So, okay, so our lows are almost the entire beat. If we do compression here, we don't want to do too much. I mean, that's the name of the game, is not doing too much. Okay, so let's do some more small compression. I'm essentially just doing small compression anywhere I see that I can, and I want to do it in small enough amounts that you aren't going to like notice a difference audibly. But the idea is, like, if you do it enough times, it's going to make a big difference in the end. So, and also at this stage, I'm keeping all the compression super light. As you'll notice, this is always sitting up by the 9. Once I do my pre-master stage, where I do more like actual compression, I'll start at the 9, and then I'll bring this down to a 6, and then a 3, and then I'll go to limiting after that. So I do get a bit more aggressive as I go. And my goal isn't, like, I don't want it to compress every time the loudest stuff hits. I just want it to sometimes compress. So just like the loudest stuff. Actually, I think I want to compress these highs a little bit, because I don't want that clap to be as prominent in this super high range. So I'm going to push this into a compressor. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to save it, and I'm actually going to consolidate this as it is, because what I've done so far is more like mixing, and I want to save some CPU power a little bit later coming up. So, but we can look and compare these. They aren't level matched, so the top one is going to be louder because I did some compression and I didn't bring the volume back up to match it. However, what I have done, which isn't quite as noticeable visually, is I've brought up different aspects of the beat. So like I brought up the clap, the hi-hats, and the 808. I just noticed that a lot of those drum sounds were kind of weak sounding, so I brought them up a little bit. And at this stage, we can actually like level match if we want. I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, I'm going to save CPU. I'm going to get rid of these. Let me bring this up to volume, and we're going to go with the pre-master chain. And I'm going to do essentially what I've already done, but a bunch more times in small amounts. And as I go with each instance of Maximus, I'm going to be compressing in more aggressive amounts. So I'm going to start off really light, like I did before with the pre-master stuff over here. And then I'm going to compress a little bit more, and I'm going to compress a little bit more. And also what you'll notice is as I do more aggressive compression, I'm going to bring the bands in a little bit. So hopefully you'll see what I mean by that. But let's start by getting rid of this. I don't know, it looks like I could use a little bit of a boost here. Small boost. And I could even do something like this. Very small amount. Just bring all that up a little bit. I think I could use a bit of a boost in this bass range as well, because like I said, I didn't do a great job of mixing this. Okay, so let's go to our first instance of Maximus. In this one, my bands are very wide, or like, I don't know what the word is, but my low band is very low, my high band is very high, and my middle band is almost the entire beat. As far as where I am, I'm at 50 hertz and below, and then for my high, I'm at about 10K and above. So let's start with below. So my goal is to just compress in very small amounts. Most of the time it probably won't even be noticeable, like this. Probably won't even be audible, you won't even notice it. And I didn't have to push into it or out of it at all, so I don't have to adjust my levels. I think that's fine. Let's go to medium. I'm also merging the low frequencies here. And like I said earlier, taking the high frequencies and pushing them out a bit. Tiny amount of compression. I could probably do a little bit more. Let's go to the highs. And this is 10K and above, so this is pretty high pitch. I don't want to compress everything, I just want the loudest stuff to be compressed a little bit. For the master. Very small, unnoticeable amounts of compression. And at this step, I might even add some like saturation to the low end. Just a small amount. Okay. All right, so if you'll notice, like I said, everything was being compressed around this number 9 here. In this second instance of Maximus, I'm going to bring it down to a 6, or around the 6. And I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to compress each band individually, and then I'll do the master. And you'll notice for this one, I brought the bands in a little bit. So this low band it doesn't start at 50. It now starts at 175. Okay. And then this band doesn't start at 10K. I brought it up to about 5K. But the process will be basically the same. Okay. So let's start with the lows. Small, unnoticeable changes. Hopefully. And again, on this one, I don't think I need to adjust. I think I'm compressing about as much as I want to. Because I'm not compressing on every single hit of the 808 or kick. Let's go to the mids. I think that's fine. So again, I don't think I'm going to adjust this much, if at all. Let's go to the highs. Oh, and again, my highs are being separated and my lows are being merged a little bit. I do that in small amounts each time. So let's go to the highs. I can be kind of aggressive with this because I don't want my clap to be as prominent in that high end as it is in the middle. So I tend to compress my highs a little bit more aggressively because claps tend to bleed into that high range a little bit more. So I brought this down 1.2 to get the level where I wanted it, so I'm going to bring it up by 1.2. Let's go to the master. I don't want to compress every single time something hits, so I'm just bringing this down until I'm only compressing like the loudest stuff. So I went down, let's go down one more. 0.1 more, I guess. So I went down 1.1 to get this where I wanted it, so I'm going to go up by 1.1. Okay, so let's go to our third instance of Maximus, and I'm going to do it again. The only difference is this time I'm going to be a little bit more strategic with how I place my bands. So I'm going to solo the mids, and I'm going to pull this back until I don't really hear that kick or that 808 anymore. I'm starting to hear it there, so let me pull it back right about somewhere in here. And then I don't want to hear the hats, so I'm going to pull this back until I don't hear the hats. Okay. And then after that point, it's the same process. Okay. But you'll notice that I'm compressing a lot more aggressively here. So I was doing the 9, then around the 6. Now I've brought it a little bit below the 3. So let's go for it. Okay, so I think I found a sweet spot. So that's going up by 0.4. So I need to go down by 0.4. 0.3 is fine. Dude, I wish, I feel like if there was a dial that you had to make giant movements just to, make 0.1 adjustments, I feel like that would be super useful. Like you just right click a thing here and then a big thing for blind people pulls up and you make one adjust, like one giant move, and it only moves at 0.1. I feel like something like that would be helpful. I am aware that they have this thing, but this functions the exact same as this dial. Like, they're both just as hard to use. And I know that they have other things, but all of these like are just as difficult to get precise movements as it is on the dial. So this doesn't really seem to help me much. Anyway, so let's go to the mid. I am going to, since I dialed this mid in a little bit, I'm going to push this to the middle slightly. Because I'm only capturing that one moment, really, that's super loud, plus this little part. Let's go to the highs. Because the loudest part of these highs is that clap. And I don't necessarily want my clap taking up, like, the loudest part, like, being the most noticeable part of my high end. So I went down 1.1, so let's go up by 1.1. Go to the master. Just barely compressing. And I went down 1, so I can go up by 1. Okay, let's go to the limiter, and at this point we can push the volume up because we've done a bunch of compression. So let's push this up as much as we can before we start to limit. Let's see, how much volume did we push up? 2 decibels. So in this chain of compression, I think we pushed it up about 2 decibels. And keep in mind, we also level matched as we went, so we probably gained a little bit more volume than that. And we did so like using very tiny amounts of compression. Like if you were to, let's just turn everything off and back on, and let's just hear the difference. You can see I'm going all the way up to 0 decibels. And then when I turn this on, I'm still going up to 0 decibels, but everything is just a little bit louder, a little bit clearer. Okay. The next thing in my pre-chain is a patcher preset, which is called 3-band stereo separation. So when you click on that, this pops up, and it lets you, push things in the mono field versus the separated field. I tend to take the low end and pull this knob down, which puts it in the mono space. And I'm already doing this in small amounts with Maximus, so I don't need to make giant changes here. So just barely pulling the low knob down, barely pulling the high knob out, and then you can do the opposite with these if you want, or just kind of move them back and forth to taste, just to help me push things out in the stereo field a little bit, pull things in. Next thing in the chain is another patcher preset. This is a mid-side EQ, so I like to look at my mids and my sides independently and kind of make adjustments. Same thing with up here. And then on just the mids, I've got an instance of Fruity Limiter, because sometimes I like to push just the mids through a little bit of saturation. Even though I do that a little bit with Maximus, sometimes I do it a little bit more here. It just kind of depends on the track. So these are just the mids. So if I wanted to, I could push the volume up a little bit and use this like a soft clipper. Okay, you can do stuff like this. I'm not going to do that right now, but that is one thing you can do. I'm going to leave it as is. Just kind of lets me monitor the mids a little bit better. I really want to make some of this up. I feel like there's a gap in this area. I don't want to make giant boosts because I don't want things to start poking out and being like super resonant. But small adjustments. This is a point. Okay. I can also do some low and high cuts. I'm also doing this, I'm doing some low cutting with Maximus as well, so you don't need to do too much of this. Okay, let's look at the entire EQ. So again, I think I can boost this up just a small amount. I could probably get a little bit louder down here as well. So save as often as you can in FL Studio. It has a tendency of crashing, or at least it used to. It doesn't seem to as much anymore, but... Okay, so let's go ahead and throw in our master chain. Okay, let's look at the EQ. I've already boosted this a little bit. I don't necessarily want to do it too much more. Okay, something I'm noticing is I think I still want the 808 to be a little bit louder. So I'm actually going to run this through an instance of Maximus before it goes to the master chain. So all I want at this point is to get that 808 to be a little bit louder. So let me pull these bands in. So I want this to be a little bit louder. So let me put a dot here. And then a dot here. So anything between these two dots, I want to be louder. And then for this part, I kind of want to do the opposite. I want the low part of the 808 to be brought up. And then I want this top part of the 808 to be kind of compressed a little bit. I don't want it to be quite as loud. And then let me bring this part up again. So and then I want this to be even louder still, so I'm going to push this a little bit. I think I want to focus in on the hi-hats. So before I do that, the hats are a little bit sharp sounding. Yeah, I want those hats to be a little bit more centered. So I'm going to go find them. Actually, this may be the perfect range. I'm going to compress this range a little bit so that the high end of the clap is getting cut off a little bit more. And then I'm going to put this in the mono space more so than it currently is. But I'm fine with the level that it's at. In fact, I might even want it a little bit louder. And like I said, I want to put this in the mono space a little bit, merge it. While I'm here, I could do a little bit of compression on the low end. I say the low end, this is almost the entire beat. Yeah. So I went down by 1.8. So let's go up. 1.8. So let's go up by 0.9. Okay, now I'm going to come to the master chain and start doing all of this stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up this limiter, turn off the saturation, and I've got a compressor. So you probably just heard how much louder it made it. And the way that I got these settings for this compressor is I put this compressor on another beat that I was working on, and then I just played with the settings until I got something that I like the sound of. And now I kind of start with those settings and then tweak them. So let me just play with these a little bit. Okay, so just a small amount of compression, just to kind of bring everything up a little bit. And then I've got another compressor. Oh, and by the way, both of these compressors are like optional. I usually turn them on, and then if I don't like the way that it sounds, I'll tweak the settings. Or if it's still too much, I'll turn it off, or I'll show you here in just a second. With this second compressor, what I normally do is make the settings kind of ridiculous. So here's the second compressor. And by ridiculous, what I mean is 0 attack, and then a kind of fast release. Or, I'm sorry, a slow release. So maybe 100 milliseconds. 140, that's, good enough. And then I'll go with like a 3-to-1 ratio, and then I bring the threshold way down and the gain up to make up for that. And you'll notice this is going to be way too much compression, and everything's going to get super flat, and it's going to just sound way louder, but not great. Yeah, everything's just like, oh, that's way too much, okay? However, what you can do is compress it way too much like this, and then take this mix knob and just bring it down. This may be too much still, so, and like I said, this is optional. You can turn this off. If it sounds bad, don't use it. I just use it, and then if I don't like the sound of it, I turn it off. So, I tweak the settings. Same thing with this compressor. Sometimes I've done a little bit too much here, and by mixing it back, you can get a little bit of a more subtle effect. So let's compare before and after both of these compressors, even though they're both mixed out a little bit. So here's before. And then here's after. So there's a noticeable change there, even though I've got them both mixed out. This one's almost entirely mixed out. I've just got a little bit of that signal coming through, but not much. And then let's look and see how close we're getting to the limiter. We're pretty much right on it. In fact, we're limiting slightly, which is fine, because the amount I'm limiting is so small, nobody's ever going to notice it. Let's go to our last instance of Maximus. And before that, I'm going to save. In this instance of Maximus, I'm going to treat it like I treated the third instance of Maximus in the remaster chain over here. So I'm going to be like deliberate with my bands, okay? So let's go find our bands. Go to the middle band, and again, I'm going to pull this back until I don't hear the kick or the 808. So about right there. I mean, I can still kind of hear the kick. So I might pull it back a little bit. And then I don't really want the hi-hats. We'll pull that up. Alright, now at this stage, I'm going to be limiting. So at all the other stages, I was compressing, and I was doing so like more aggressively as I went. So I started up here at the 9, then I went down to the 6, then the 3, and now I'm going to be limiting everything. But again, I'm doing so in very small, hopefully unnoticeable amounts. So, and also at this stage, I'm merging the low end a little bit. And I really only want to limit the loudest parts, which is kind of what I'm doing here. It's probably good enough. So I went up 0.3, so I need to go down by 0.3. Okay, let's go to the mids. Seems like there's just that one, maybe a couple of parts that are a little bit louder. So I'm going to pull, so I went down 0.7, so I'm going to go up by 0.7. Go to the highs. Just want to get the loudest parts. And we probably don't want to be limiting this much. So let's bring it back a little bit. Okay, so we brought it back by 0.8. So let's bring it up by 0.8. master. Again, we just want to get the loudest parts. So we went down by 0.8. Let's go up by 0.8. 0.9 is fine. So I'm about to make up the gain anyway. Let's do one more instance of this guy. Again, very small changes at a time, because I'm doing this a bunch of different times. Throughout every instance of Maximus almost, I'm putting things in mono versus separated, and then I'm doing it here as well. So you don't need to do giant changes here. Very small changes. Okay, and then at the very end, I've got a soft clipper and a limiter. So I'm going to put the limiter first, just so I can see how loud I'm getting before the soft clipper. And then I'm going to use this information to help tell me how much I want to push into the soft clipper. So let me just pause it here. So I'm going to, just so we can have a visual, I can probably push into the soft clipper about to there. Visually, it looks like I could probably push into it. If you look at the top left corner, it says negative 1.3 decibels. So visually, this looks like where like the top of the highest peaks are, and just below that is where, you know, slightly not quite as loud stuff is. So I can probably push about this much into a soft clipper before I start to notice distortion. So I'm going to use that as like my baseline. So I brought this down 1.3. So let's bring it back up. So I'm going to push 1.3 decibels into the soft clipper and see if it distorts. If it does, I'm going to back it off. If it doesn't distort, then I might push a little bit more into it. So I've moved the limiter after the soft clipper so I can see, you know, what it looks like after it hits the soft clipper. So let's push into this about 1.3. And I'm not hearing any distortion. So I can probably push a little bit more into this. Yeah, I could probably push another 0.9 into it. So let's try it. Let's try pushing 0.9 more into it. So I'm going to bring this, so if I'm going up 0.9, I'm at 1.3, so I need to go to 2.2. 2.1 is fine. And that's looking better. I could still probably push this a little bit more. Looking at the top of the peaks here, I could probably push it another decibel into that, maybe more. But I don't want to squash this very top stuff too much more, especially this, like something like this right here, where I've got more information than just like this little stick kick part. I don't know if I want to squash all of that down too much. Maybe I'll push it, you know, a little bit more into it, but I don't want to do too much. So let's I'm going to back it off a little bit. .3 is probably fine. So let's listen before and after our all of our processing. Okay, so we started out with a beat, and I did some processing to it, and it made it sound like this. And pretty much the only processing I did at the very beginning, as you saw, was I brought up some of the levels of some of the things that I thought needed to be louder. So I brought up the drums basically, and the 808, the clap, and the hi-hat. Just brought those up a little bit. And then we went through and did a whole bunch of different processing. So it's mostly a bunch of compression, limiting, EQing, and stereo imaging, basically. And after we did all of that, it sounded like this. So here's before. and here's after. So yeah, I think it's in a better place than it was before, sounding wise. So as with my other mastering videos and any video I make really, the purpose is twofold. If you don't know anything about music, hopefully you'll learn something. And on the flip side, if you really know what you're doing, and you see something that I can improve, feel free to let me know down in the comments, because I'm always down to, learn more. I guess we can let the beat ride a little bit, and then that'll be it.